Let's see what our next guest thinks. President Trump's personal attorney and former New York City Mayor, Rudy Giuliani. Mayor, thanks so much for joining.
Oh, thank you very much.
So
I really appreciate it.
No, my pleasure. So, I listen to Adam Schiff, and before you were mayor of New York City, you were a well-known prosecutor in the Southern District of New York, among other places. Rudy, I need to get your take on the strategy of the Democratic House impeachment managers. I hear people saying, oh, they're eloquent and they're laying out this master case for impeachment and they're going to sway Republicans. I want to get your take on their legal strategy, their legal acumen, in particular, Adam Schiff.
Well, I mean, it's very, very easy to impress people who are biased in your favor. In fact, they're not only biased in your favor, they're kind of a little crazy, over the top, hating Trump. And basically, if you just stand up and say, good morning, you're brilliant. And if you point out the fact that these are not impeachable offenses, they don't have any evidence, it's all hearsay, and there's a case out there of corruption on Democrats that is massive, possibly one of the biggest scandals in the history of the United States, because the press attacks you and makes them really, really smart. I think Adam Schiff, first of all, I think he's a congenital liar, and I think he's a terrible lawyer. I think that if this were being done in a court, the case would have been thrown out the first day for failure to charge a crime. He would be fired for having wasted the money of the prosecutor's office on a defective indictment.
Now, let me ask you about that, because you had tweeted something the other day. I thought it was a masterstroke. You said, look, if any normal, I'll paraphrase what you tweeted, but you basically said if a normal prosecutor in any legitimate, normal court of law brought this indictment before a judge and asked for it to be dismissed, it would be summarily, immediately dismissed.
Well, I'll tell you, if any prosecutor had brought this before the judge I clerked for, the 2 years federal judge I clerked for, the guy might have been put in jail.
Wow.
I mean, he certainly would be threatened with contempt. I mean, you charge. Rule 12 of the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure says that you've got to challenge an indictment before trial if it fails to state a crime. This fails to state an impeachable offense. He doesn't get to make up impeachable offenses.
Right.
The Constitution provides the limits on congressional power. They have to find bribery, treason, a high crime, or misdemeanor. There's never been an impeachment of a president without that.
Well, let me ask you about witnesses. That's the big debate, right? That's top of news right now. It's headline news. Are there going to be witnesses? Aren't there going to be witnesses? The big question is, will there be a trade, a swap? The Bidens for Bolton. So first and foremost, should John Bolton, if there are going to be witnesses, should John Bolton testify or should he not, for the reasons the president raised? He just has too much national security information. It could irreparably damage relations with other nations if the Democrats go down certain roads.
I don't think there should be witnesses. I think the case should be thrown out at the conclusion of the opening statements. I thought it should have been dismissed before there were even opening statements for failure to charge an impeachable offense. When we finish, we're going to hear not only did they fail to charge an impeachable offense, but by the time you finished at both of their opening statements, you're going to find out the president didn't do anything wrong. The abuse of power was actually an exercise of presidential responsibility to make sure the laws are faithfully executed. He was dealing with allegations of massive corruption in the Ukraine. The Bidens made millions illegally in the Ukraine. And so did a lot of other people. That's a stain on the reputation of the United States. In the Ukraine, we're a laughingstock. Every time Biden would go there and tell them they shouldn't be corrupt, they'd laugh their heads off because they say, you and your son are pulling millions out of here. You're being paid by the most corrupt guy in Ukraine.
So let me ask you
how that damages the relationship between our two countries. That has to be a solid one in order to stand up against Russia. And President Trump had the guts to do something about it. There are people in Ukraine who say, thank God you finally have a president, because you've always been accusing us of corruption. But you guys, the Americans, share in a lot of it. Particularly under Obama, it got really bad.
Let me ask you about that.
The Democrats are doing this because they're covering up. If you begin to open up the Biden case, it's going to rip apart the Obama administration.
So that's what I was going to ask you. So you're saying definitively that when it comes to Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and people around them, with regards to Ukraine and corruption, that it's not simply smoke, there's actual fire there?
I have the facts. I have the documents. I got the tapes. I got the witnesses on tape. I've got them sitting here, and I'm going to put it out over the next 3 weeks. I'm going to do a podcast for 3-4 weeks in a row, and each segment is going to be devoted to one witness after another, after another, after another. These are the witnesses that the U.S. Embassy in Kiev prevented from coming to the United States. These are the witnesses the FBI won't talk to. These are the witnesses the Justice Department didn't want to hear from because they wanted to explain Ukrainian collusion. All they wanted to hear about was Russian collusion. All they wanted to do was hurt the president. But I mean, if Democrats pay money for false information and use it to hurt Trump, that's perfectly okay. They don't care about it.
Well, I mean, that's been the trend.
I'm his defense lawyer, and I'm going to make sure they care about it. And this whole idea that we were digging up dirt on Joe Biden is ridiculous. I wasn't digging up dirt on Joe Biden. I was getting evidence of Ukrainian collusion with Democrats, and the dirt was handed to me on a silver platter. And it isn't dirt. It's solid evidence of two big bribes that Biden participated in while he was vice president of the United States.
Now, do you think that, did this go back to Marie Yovanovitch? Did this go back to Bill Taylor, all of these people that testified against the president?
I can't say about Taylor, but Yovanovitch certainly played a role in covering this up.
Wow.
More than one witness can testify that she prevented them from coming to the United States. And it was quite clear because they had incriminating evidence about Democrats. And that she was a very, very partisan Hillary person during the election. And that she demanded that a case on George Soros' company be dismissed. There's documentary proof of that. That she perjured herself when she said that she didn't want Shokin to come because he was on a corruption list. He was never on any such list. Actually, the reason she gave was a specious reason about he was in ill health. There's so much on Yovanovitch, it's ridiculous that they are sanctifying her. I mean, she was aware of false evidence that was created in Ukraine in order to, in the words of two witnesses, destroy the Trump campaign. So she's up to her eyeballs in this, and the State Department has been covering up for her.
What happens?
They never bothered to. State Department has all these allegations. They've decided she's innocent without investigating.
So what happens to the Democratic Party going into the 2020 elections when all of this becomes public knowledge?
I think the American people, if we can get it through to them, get it through the vast media cover-up, the American people will be shocked at the level of corruption that went on in the Obama administration. And it doesn't end with Ukraine. I mean, Biden did the same thing in Iraq, where his brother got 1/3 of a $1.5 billion housing contract just when he gets appointed point man.
Yeah.
And then it happened in China when he went to try to get China to withdraw from the islands. Of course, he failed like he always does, but the family got rich. I mean, every time Joe became a point man, he struck out for the United States and the family got millions.
So let me ask you this, because I have to. So what do you say to those on the left who allege you were the one who broke the rules, you were the one who broke the laws with regards to Ukraine?
I didn't break any rules. I did exactly what I should do as a defense lawyer. I was given evidence handed to me of alternative explanation for the false crime that my client was charged with. I was given that evidence in November of 2018, 2 years before the 2020 election, before Joe Biden was a candidate, and when Mueller was trying to frame Donald Trump for Russian collusion. So I'm not going to investigate explanations that a lot of this originated in Ukraine,
right,
and that it was orchestrated by Democrats in Ukraine, and that money was paid in the Ukraine for false information, and that one of the people involved in it was Joe Biden. I was going to get scared away because Joe Biden was involved in it.
Yeah.
Just because you're a potential candidate for vice president,
Right.
you can take $5-8 million in bribes.
Yeah. I always thought that was a ludicrous assertion.
I mean, everybody would run for president if that was the case.
Mayor, before I let you go, Bill Barr, John Durham, a lot of people on the right, many of us conservatives, are very frustrated at what we saw happen to President Trump. We saw people like Peter Strzok and Comey and McCabe and James Clapper all walk. Is anybody going to get prosecuted, in your opinion? You prosecuted many high-profile figures.
Well, my opinion is very, very firm on people have to get prosecuted to prevent this from happening again.
Yeah.
This is a terrible thing that has happened to our country. This is a terrible, terrible thing. They literally first tried to prevent him from becoming president illegally. I will be able to prove that they created evidence, leaked it out, and had a plan to destroy his candidacy with that evidence. Then, having failed in doing that, they created a phony investigation, and then a second phony investigation, and then this ridiculous impeachment. He's being impeached for two things: for asking the president of another country to investigate mind-blowing corruption involving the highest levels of both governments, the president of one country and the vice president of another. If he didn't do it, he wouldn't be a good president.
Right, right.
And number two, he's being impeached because he's challenging subpoenas, which every president of the United States has done. Obama did it constantly. And the first person to assert executive privilege, you asked me about Bolton, first person to assert executive privilege was George Washington, when he refused to allow the correspondence with John Jay to be given to the House of Representatives because they opposed the Jay Treaty. He refused to give it to them. And believe it or not, some of those idiots threatened him with impeachment.
So
it was back in 1797.
So there's nothing, this is historical precedent.
In those days, we had statesmen in Congress, and the statesmen shot down the Schiffs and the Pelosi's. And unfortunately, the Schiffs and the Pelosi's are running the ship now. And they have no concern, or at least their hatred of Trump far outweighs any concern they have about our country or our Constitution. So people have to be held accountable. Biden has to be held accountable for the years and years that his family got wealthy selling his public office. It's not one act. It's not two. Point man became the most lucrative job in Washington. Joe becomes a point man, family makes millions. Joe becomes a point man, family makes millions. Read Schweiker's book that just came out. Yeah. It's all in there.
It's good stuff. Mayor Rudy Giuliani.
And it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy that we don't have equal justice in this country.
I couldn't agree more.
It has to be restored. That's one of the ways that Donald Trump can help to fix America, where we all get judged by the same standard. I mean, imagine if Donald Trump and Donald Trump Jr. were involved in Donald Trump Jr. getting $1 billion from China and the Bank of China being his partner in a private equity firm.
Oh,
you think I'd have to be arguing the case, or there'd be 10 special prosecutors by now?
And front page headlines globally.
Oh, the New York Times would make it, 10 times worse than it actually was, and it would be pretty bad.
You know, I agree with every word you say.
We all know that. We all know that. Every single American knows that if it were Donald Trump and Donald Trump Jr., instead of this media cover-up, there'd be a media pile-on. It shouldn't be that way, and it shouldn't affect prosecutors at all. They shouldn't be intimidated by the fact that the press is going to rip them apart if they do the right thing.
Well, unless they're complicit,
Constitution to handle it, then don't become a prosecutor.
Unless they're complicit with the other side, which we saw with many on.
Well, a lot of them are. All of Mueller's staff were a bunch of activist Democrats.
Yeah, I mean that was the big problem. Mayor Rudy Giuliani, an absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing news channel, now in 65 million homes. Get Newsmax TV on all the major cable systems, or go to newsmaxtv.com and click on the Find Newsmax tab to locate us. Remember, Newsmax TV, we're real news for real people.